All right, so let's look at the structure of this Mind Workstation session to train the attention values from the Neurosky devices. All right, so it's a rather complex session using a lot of advanced engines. If you really wanted to exploit all of its features, then you would need the enterprise version because of a custom engine that I've programmed here. Otherwise, there's ways to bring in sound files that do essentially the same thing, but you definitely need at least the professional version because we'll use the graphing, we'll use the timers, we'll use the random engines. All right, so I could probably strip down to a simpler session that would work at just the base of my workstation. However, it's not going to be quite as dynamic. So let's look at the structure of it. Here I have an entrainment track that's powered by, first of all, let me look at this time control section here. This is a technique that I figured out on how to control engines and their time. So basically what happens is that for 5 minutes, the session is divided into 5-minute blocks. So for 5 minutes, I'm going to deliver random numbers, random speaking numbers, and you'll see that when I demonstrate the session, and also SMR frequency, SMR beta frequencies delivered through sound on amplitude and a noise track, which is very low in the mix, and through SpectraStrobe. Now I could adapt this to audio strobe quite easily, but I choose to use SpectraStrobe in this case. So you need the MindPlace Kasina if you wanted to use this system as it is right now. So it's divided into 5-minute segments. So for 5 minutes it's delivering beta and it's speaking the random numbers that you concentrate on. That's the attention training segments. So you're training attention for 5 minutes. Then you have a 5-minute relaxation period, a rest period, and that has a Ambience Generator that's playing beach sounds, and the entrainment switches over to theta frequencies, and so you're getting SpectraStrobe and noise track, amplitude entrainment frequencies, and you're getting the beach sounds. Plus the tones that are the feedback for the training are not operative during these segments. So you don't need to be concerned about the attention values during that time. In fact, the point is to rest your brain and relax and just let your mind drift a little bit. So we're doing this in 5-minute segments. 5 minutes of training, 5 minutes of rest. 5 minutes of training, 5 minutes of rest, and then rest on the way out. For a 30-minute session. All right, so that's the overall plan of the structure, and let's look in more detail of how it's implemented. So obviously I have the Neurosky device here, and it's normalized through the studying the developer documents and exploring different formula engines. I know how now to normalize the Neurosky data so that it fits within a graph in a reasonable way compared to just the basics of what you get raw from the chip, which is all over the place. And now I know how to normalize this data. So that's being done, and then the attention value is controlling a tone track, this tone track that I mentioned back here. Now this tone track by design is an annoyance. It's an annoying track. All right, so it's a pitch of 1800, which is high and piercing, and the volume of that is controlled by the Neurosky engine. So the attention value when it's from 0 to 60, and remember 60 is our cutoff point for an elevated range, slightly elevated range. Then when it's 0, the tone track's at its highest volume at 10, and when it's at 60, it just starts to come on. So anywhere below 60, the volume's going to go between 0 and 10, getting increasingly loud as you move further away, lower into the range. So again, that's designed to be kind of a negative reinforcement, because when you hear this piercing tone, you want to get rid of it. And that's how you internally train to keep your attention levels high. So we also have the random engines that are controlling the entrainment track. Okay, so we have the entrainment track here that's being controlled by the timed input and output. But what the timed input and output is reading from the random generating track. So you can see that SMR random, which we'll look at, goes from 12 to 14 hertz, and it's random, and it updates every 10 seconds. So anywhere between these numbers, it's going to deliver that frequency. Do that for 5 minutes, okay, as part of our layout, track layout. Then the theta, we're going to go from 4 to 7, updating every 10 seconds. And we're going to do that for 5 minutes. And then it'll ramp back to the beginning. So it just keeps playing these two one after the other. And the engine itself updates every 5 seconds. So that's how we're getting the 5 minute, and then 5 minute, and then 5 minute. As I mentioned, this is a special layout technique on how to control this speaking engine that I have, that is having numbers fed to it by this formula. So every 0.8 seconds on its basic settings, which is what you see here, that's 0.8, it's going to feed another random number between 0 and 64. All right, and that's just a random range. So it'll always be feeding you new numbers, and that gives you something to concentrate on, something to focus on while you're training for the attention. Now, the SpectraStrobe also does kind of an interesting thing, which I found helpful too. Keep in mind that during the attention training period, the entrainment track is set to SMR beta frequencies, 12 to 14. And so the SpectraStrobe red is chained to that. You can see that it's chained to that track. Now, the green is set to 0.8. All right, and I actually did that in a preferred technique of myself that I prefer, of just setting it in the advanced entrainment and just putting the value in. It might be hidden if you were to try to deconstruct the track, but in further my tutorials and training, I'll show you how to do that and why that's like a convenient way without having to add another formula engine or do something to set this specifically, because you don't really have, you have the flashing phase and all that. It needs to be chained to some type of entrainment. So rather than add another entrainment track or another formula engine, I just do it as a mini formula inside of these advanced entrainment areas. So the green is basically in sync with the voice coming back while the voice is being delivered at 0.8 seconds. And so that also, I found, gives you something visually to focus on. You'll have your red flicker, and then you'll have the green come on, pulse along with the voice or close to it. And that helps. That gives you something to focus on. So I've just by experimentation, I found that that's useful. Again, I could convert this to audio strobe, no problem, but I'm doing it by SpectraStrobe green and SpectraStrobe red. So again, the Ambience Generator comes in only during the periods of rest, and it's just using the beach preset because I like that one. It's nice and it's got enough variety to it, and it's got kind of a push and pull effect with the ocean, which helps you to relax. So that's nice. And then there's theta frequencies during that, which theta can help rejuvenate during periods of intense concentration. Then a period of theta can help your mind to rejuvenate, your brain to rejuvenate before another period of activity. So alternating theta stimulation points are recommended for study type sessions. And again, the focus of this is to train the Neurosky focus. So to display those, we have two graphing engines. And the first graph displays the attention score. All right, it shows the attention only on the graph. So it's our main source of the data that we're interested in. Whereas the second graphing engine displays all the normalized Neurosky data so we can study the raw data, but it's also scaled to a proper range where it's useful to us. So the second graph shows the overall brainwave patterns of the session, and I also have the attention score set on it, but it's not normalized down to that same range, and that's just for an overlay purpose so I can switch back and forth and kind of study the two. And I could normalize it to where it fit within this range, but I just opted not to do that yet. So that's the basic overall structure of the session. This speak value engine is something that I've programmed, and it's requires the enterprise because that's the only version that'll allow you to do custom engine plugins, which I don't really agree with. I think all versions should have that capability, but it's not up to me. So again, there's ways you could make random speaking sound files and bring those in. And also for training, as you advance, you'd probably want to have audio books or spoken text or things that you are actually studying to use in this attention training environment. But the speak value with the random numbers is a good, I found, system to get started, and I can integrate it right within my workstation. So all right, there's the basic overview of the session. Next, we'll look at some of the data that I've gathered using this system, and we'll also see it in action just a little bit as some examples.